The galaxy was still reeling from the aftermath of the Karathi War. Once a dominating empire, the Karathi had fallen in the face of humanity's unexpected resilience. Their vast armadas, once thought invincible, were reduced to burning husks scattered across the stars. Earth had become the unlikeliest of galactic powers, a symbol of defiance and strength. Yet, for all their victory, the human leaders knew this was only the beginning. Captain Alina Valen stood on the observation deck of the Erebus, a massive battlecruiser now serving as Earth's flagship. Her gaze lingered on the swirling nebula outside, a violent reminder of the battles they had fought and the ones that were still to come. The crew of the Erebus was preparing for a new mission, one that would take them into the heart of the galaxy, where the true stakes of humanity's new role would be tested. The Obsidian Order, a shadowy faction rumored to have infiltrated the highest echelons of galactic power, was making its move. "We've been warned, Captain," her second-in-command, Lieutenant Harper, said, interrupting her thoughts. "The Obsidian Order is mobilizing. They've made no secret of their contempt for our rise." Alina nodded grimly. "They're the reason we can't rest. If they're willing to expose themselves this early, it means they're planning something bigger. We need to find out what before they strike." Dr. Lirasol, the brilliant scientist who had unlocked the secrets of humanity's advanced technology, stood beside a holographic map, eyes narrowed as she traced her finger across the data. "We've detected strange energy signatures in the outer rim. It could be them, or worse, it could be something far older." She turned to face Alina, her face a mixture of concern and excitement. "I've been researching the possibility that the Obsidian Order might be connected to something older than the Karathi, a race of beings known only as the Etherians. If they're involved, this could be worse than we thought." Alina frowned, her mind racing. The Etherians were more than myth. They were legends, being said to control the very fabric of reality itself. But that was a story from a forgotten age, one that had never been fully understood. "Is it possible?" Alina asked. Dr. Lyra's voice was low, almost a whisper. "The Etherians are said to have been the creators of the galaxy's oldest civilizations. They were wiped out in an ancient war. At least, that's what we were told. But what if they never truly disappeared? What if they're the ones manipulating the Obsidian Order?" Vorn Tarek, the enigmatic warrior whose past was shrouded in mystery, stepped forward from the shadows. His eyes, usually cold and distant, were burning with something else now: determination. "Then we need to find them first." Alina looked at her team, each of them a cornerstone in this new, fragile empire humanity was trying to build. They had the knowledge, the will, and now the responsibility to protect not just Earth, but the entire galaxy from what was coming. "You're right," Alina said, "but we need to be prepared for anything. If the Etherians are involved, we're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting for the future of the galaxy. We can't afford to make mistakes." As the team rallied around her, the ship's alert systems blared, signaling the arrival of their first mission, a journey to the outer rim, where the truth awaited, shrouded in darkness and ancient mysteries. It was a dangerous path, one that would test not only their strength but their unity. And in the distance, beyond the stars, something watched, waiting for the moment when the rising legacy of humanity would either shine or burn. The Erebus slipped through the void, its sleek form cutting a path toward the unknown. On board, tension simmered as the crew braced for what lay ahead. The Outer Rim was a vast, uncharted region of space, home to rogue factions, ancient ruins, and mysteries that even the most seasoned explorers hesitated to touch. It was the perfect hiding place for the Obsidian Order, and if Dr. Lirasol's theories were correct, the Etherians themselves. Captain Alina Valen stood in the command center, her hands clasped behind her back as she studied the tactical displays. The silence in the room was thick, broken only by the soft hum of the ship's engines. The crew was ready, but Alina could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. This mission wasn't just about securing humanity's future. It was about proving to the galaxy that Earth wasn't a fluke. Their victory over the Kureithi had earned them respect, but respect was fragile. One wrong move, and the galaxy could turn on them, as quickly as it had embraced them. She turned to face her crew. "All systems are operational," she said, her voice steady, but the fire in her eyes betraying her concern. "We're about to enter the Outer Rim, where no human ship has ever ventured. We don't know what's waiting for us out there. Stay sharp." Lieutenant Harper nodded. He had been by her side through the thick of the Kureithi conflict, his loyalty unquestioned. "Understood, Captain. We've got your 6. Dr. Lyrasol was already at the navigation station, her eyes fixed on a swirling galaxy of coordinates and star maps. She was the brains behind their mission. Her knowledge of ancient technology was invaluable, but her obsession with the Etherians was something else. Elena had seen the scientist grow increasingly distant in the last few days, consumed by the puzzle she was trying to solve. Lyra's discoveries about the Etherians were disturbing, and Elena knew they could change the very course of history. "We're approaching the first coordinates," Lyra announced, her voice sharp. "There's something out there, but it doesn't make sense. The energy signature is erratic, almost as if it's being masked." "Can you triangulate the source?" Elena asked, moving closer. Lyra hesitated, tapping the console. "I can try, but it might take a few minutes to break through the interference." Elena's gaze shifted to Vorn Tarek, who had been silent until now. His quiet demeanor often masked a sharp intellect and a deep knowledge of the galaxy's darker corners. He wasn't just a warrior, his past was wrapped in secrets, and his connection to ancient civilizations was something only he truly understood. "We can't afford delays," Elena said, meeting Vorn's eyes. "What do you think?" Vorn's voice was calm, but laced with the kind of quiet authority that always seemed to put people at ease. "Whatever is out there, it's not a coincidence. The Obsidian Order is active in this sector. They'll be watching us." The words hung in the air, heavy with the truth that the team had already begun to understand. They weren't just chasing shadows, they were walking into a trap. The Etherians had vanished from history for a reason, and now humanity was unknowingly about to stir the ashes of an ancient war. Lyra's voice broke the silence again. "I've got it. The source of the energy is coming from a derelict station, possibly an old research facility. The signature matches a class of technology known to be used by the Etherians in their early experiments." A chill ran through Elena. "Send the coordinates to the crew. Prepare for a boarding operation. We don't know what we'll find on that station, but I want every member of this crew ready for anything. This isn't just a reconnaissance mission anymore. It's a search for answers." The ship's alarms sounded as the Erebus dropped out of warp, its engines humming softly as it approached the ominous, floating structure in the void. A large, ghostly silhouette loomed ahead, a station long abandoned, its metal hull pocked with the scars of age and warfare. Through the windows, nothing moved. There were no signs of life, just the silence of the void and the ominous hum of a past better left forgotten. Elena felt the weight of her decision settle in her chest. This was no longer about proving Earth's strength. It was about survival and understanding just how deeply humanity's legacy had been entwined with forces beyond their comprehension. Forces that had been lying in wait until now. The Erebus hovered in the shadow of the ancient station, its sleek hull barely visible against the backdrop of the swirling cosmos. The crew stood tense, eyes locked on the derelict structure as Elena Valen gave the order to deploy a boarding party. Every instinct told her that the station was not just a relic, it was a trap, but they had no choice. The threat of the Etherians was too great, and the answers they sought were here, buried in the silence. "Harper, you're with me," Elena said, her voice steady despite the unease gnawing at her gut. "Lyra, Vorn, stay on the ship. We need full scans as we board. This is a reconnaissance operation, nothing more." "Understood, Captain," Harper responded, checking his gear one last time. His fingers tightened around the handle of his pulse rifle, the weapon's hum barely audible in the quiet of the boarding bay. He was ready, though the tension in his posture revealed just how much was at stake. Elena's mind raced as she stepped into the airlock, the weight of her mission settling in. This station was older than most of the galaxy's civilizations, a forgotten remnant of a time when the Etherians ruled as godlike beings, manipulating the very fabric of space and time. But the galaxy had moved on since then, centuries had passed, and the Etherians were thought to be long gone, wiped out by the wars they started. Yet now their presence felt like a dark echo, reverberating across the stars. The airlock hissed as the doors opened, revealing a dark corridor stretching out before them. The lights flickered intermittently, casting long shadows that seemed to shift with an eerie life of their own. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the sound of their boots on the metal floor. "Stay alert," Elena whispered, her hand hovering near her sidearm. She could feel the hairs on the back of her neck standing up. Something about this place felt wrong. They hadn't detected any life signs, yet she couldn't shake the feeling they weren't alone. They moved deeper into the station, their footsteps echoing through the empty halls. Every turn led to another darkened chamber, every chamber seemingly identical to the last, as though the station was designed to be disorienting, to make intruders lose their bearings. The walls were adorned with strange symbols, their meaning lost to time, but the language seemed disturbingly familiar. The same symbols had been found on the remnants of Etherian technology scattered across ancient ruins. Lyra's voice crackled through their earpieces, cutting through the tension. "Captain, I'm detecting residual energy readings. They're faint, but they're coming from deeper within the station. Whatever was here, it wasn't just abandoned. It's active, somehow." Elena's pulse quickened. "Keep tracking it, Lyra. We're heading toward the source." As they moved further into the heart of the station, a low hum began to vibrate through the floor. It was subtle at first, but it grew louder, resonating with an unnatural frequency. Harper stopped suddenly, his eyes scanning the darkened hallway ahead. "Captain, I think we're not alone." Before Elena could respond, a flash of blinding light exploded from the far end of the corridor. A shockwave of energy slammed into them, sending them both sprawling to the ground. Elena's world spun as she struggled to rise, her hand instinctively reaching for her weapon. She could hear Harper cursing under his breath, but the words were drowned out by a sudden, deafening hum. Through the disorienting light, a figure emerged, tall, metallic, and utterly alien. The being's form shimmered, as though it existed partly outside of reality, and its presence radiated a strange energy that seemed to warp space itself. Its face, if it could be called a face, was a smooth, featureless expanse of silver, but the eyes burned with an intense, intelligent malice. "Elena, look out!" Harper shouted, raising his rifle just in time to fire a burst of energy at the creature. The shot hit, but the energy dispersed harmlessly against its shimmering form, as if the being were immune to physical weapons. The figure stepped forward, its movements slow but deliberate. The air seemed to warp around it, bending in unnatural ways as it came closer. Elena's heart raced. She had faced down the Kurethi, had fought countless battles, but this was something entirely different. In a voice that echoed in her mind, the creature spoke. "You should not have come. This is the legacy you awaken, human. You will regret this trespass." The words hit her like a cold, crushing weight, and for a moment, Elena hesitated. The Etherians, this was one of them. But before she could react, the station's lights flickered again, and the creature vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the haunting hum of the station's energy core. Harper looked at Elena, fear flashing in his eyes for the first time. "Captain, this is bigger than we thought. We need to get out of here, now." Elena knew they couldn't leave, not yet. The Etherians were real, and they had just revealed themselves as humanity's greatest enemy. This wasn't a fight they could walk away from. It had only just begun. The Erebus's engines hummed quietly as it drifted away from the station, leaving the derelict structure behind like a forgotten relic of an ancient war. Elena Valen stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the stars, yet her mind remained trapped in the aftermath of what they had discovered. The Etherian presence they'd encountered on the station, if it could even be called that, was a warning, and it had only deepened the mystery. The question now wasn't just about survival, it was about understanding why humanity was being targeted by an ancient force that had vanished from the galaxy's history. Harper and Elena sat in the briefing room, the crew gathered around them. The atmosphere was heavy with the weight of their encounter. Vorn Tarek was the first to speak, his voice low and filled with an intensity that spoke to his own experiences with dark forces. Captain, I've spent years tracking remnants of Etherian technology, but I've never seen anything like what we encountered on that station. That being, it wasn't just a physical entity. It existed in a state I can't even begin to describe. Dr. Lyrasol, her eyes wide with both fascination and fear, added, the Etherians were not just a race, they were more like gods. They had the power to manipulate the very fabric of reality, to shape time, space, and even consciousness. What we saw was likely a manifestation of their consciousness, not a physical being, and the fact that it knew who we were, knew we were humans, means that they've been watching us for a very long time. Elena's brow furrowed. But why? If they're as powerful as you say, why wait until now to strike? That's the terrifying part, Lyra continued. What if the Etherians never disappeared? What if they've been manipulating the galaxy from the shadows, waiting for humanity to reach a point where we're a threat to their existence? Vorn's expression darkened. I've heard rumors of a lost city, a place where the Etherians were said to have performed their most dangerous experiments. It's a myth, but the truth behind it may be the key to understanding why they've come after us. Elena leaned forward, the urgency of their situation clear in her voice. Where is this city? Vorn hesitated, eyes narrowing as he spoke the words. In the heart of the abyssal rift, an area so far removed from known space that even the best navigators avoid it. It's a graveyard for ships that try to get too close, and no one's ever returned. But if the Etherians are still out there, that's where they'll be hiding. The room fell silent, the weight of Vorn's words sinking in. The abyssal rift was a place of myth, a region so dangerous that even the galaxy's most advanced ships would be torn apart by its violent gravitational anomalies. Yet, if there was any hope of uncovering the truth about the Etherians and stopping them, it lay within that rift. Elena's voice broke the silence, firm and resolute. We're going there. Lyra looked at Elena, her face a mix of disbelief and fear. Captain, you can't be serious. The rift is a death trap. There's no guarantee we'll survive the journey. I know the risks, Elena replied, her eyes unwavering. But if the Etherians are out there, hiding in the rift, that's where we'll find them, and we'll find the answers we need. Harper, ever the pragmatist, spoke up. Captain, we'll need a solid plan. The rift is unlike anything we've ever faced. We'll need to modify the Erebus to withstand the gravitational forces, and even then, it's not guaranteed that we'll make it out alive. Elena turned her gaze to the viewport, staring at the distant stars. A part of her felt the weight of what they were about to do, but another part of her felt the fire of determination that had carried her through every battle, every trial. This was no longer just about fighting to survive. It was about uncovering the truth and making sure humanity's legacy wasn't erased by forces older than the galaxy itself. We'll make it, Elena said, her voice quiet but filled with unshakable resolve. We have no choice. As the crew began preparing for the journey into the abyssal rift, Elena stood alone for a moment, contemplating the path ahead. The Etherians were not just an ancient threat. They were a part of humanity's history. But what did that mean for Earth? Had humanity unknowingly inherited a legacy of destruction, or were they destined to overcome it and chart their own future? In the darkness of space, the answers waited, hidden in the heart of the abyssal rift, where the line between myth and reality blurred. And there, in the quiet emptiness, something stirred, watching them from the shadows of time. The Erebus hung in the void, its engines at full power, as the crew made their final preparations for the perilous journey ahead. The abyssal rift loomed like a vast, unknowable storm at the edge of explored space, a region of space known for its violent gravitational anomalies, jagged asteroid fields, and phenomena that defied even the most sophisticated navigational systems. It was a place where the laws of physics seemed to break down, and those who ventured too close were never seen again. Yet, as Elena Valen stood on the command deck, gazing at the rift's swirling, dark clouds in the distance, she knew there was no other choice. The Etherians were out there, waiting, and every passing second brought them closer to understanding the truth. If the legends were true, the rift was not just a death trap, it was a doorway to something far greater. "Captain, the ship's modifications are complete," Dr. Lirasol reported, her voice steady but tinged with anxiety. The crew had spent the last few days reinforcing the Erebus's hull with special shielding to withstand the rift's violent gravitational forces. A new navigational protocol had been installed, using the best quantum mapping tech available, but there were no guarantees. "Thank you, Lyra," Elena replied, her focus unshakable. "Harper, are we ready for the first jump?" Harper, standing by the ship's navigation console, nodded. "As ready as we can be, Captain. We've calibrated the systems for the rift's anomalies, but it's going to be rough. Once we enter, we'll be subject to unknown gravitational shifts. The ship might take some damage." "We'll deal with it," Elena said firmly, her hands tightening around the armrests of her command chair. "Just get us through." "Understood." The crew went quiet, each person aware of the weight of the mission they were about to undertake. Elena's thoughts briefly flashed to her team. Each of them was more than capable, but the unknown nature of the rift made even the most skilled nervous. There was no charted path through the rift, no maps to guide them. They would have to rely on their wits, their training, and the technology that had been cobbled together in the last few days. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was the only plan they had. The Erebus's engines roared to life, and the ship began its slow, calculated approach toward the abyssal rift. As they neared the edge of the rift, a ripple passed through the space around them, distorting the view outside the viewport. Stars stretched and warped, like lines on a canvas being pulled and twisted. Time itself seemed to bend, stretching in strange ways. "Captain," Lyra's voice crackled in through the comms, "we're entering the rift's outer boundaries. The distortions are intensifying. We'll have to adjust our course in real time. I'll monitor the shifts." Elena nodded, though her throat tightened as she fought the wave of unease that crept over her. "This is what we've been waiting for," she reminded herself. "Whatever comes next, we have to be ready." The ship's hull groaned as the Erebus crossed the threshold into the rift's heart. The lights inside the ship flickered as gravitational waves hit them with the force of a storm. Outside, the stars had vanished, swallowed by the dark expanse. Only the occasional flicker of alien energy pulsed in the distance. The crew was being tested as never before, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Shields holding steady, Harper reported from the control panel, his face tense. "But we're going to need constant course corrections. The rift is a labyrinth." "Keep us steady," Elena ordered, her voice sharp. "Lyra, anything from the scans? Any sign of the Etherians?" The scientist's voice came through, strained but determined. "The scans are picking up strange energy signatures, fluctuations that shouldn't exist. Some of them seem to be alive, like they're adapting to our presence. It's almost as if the rift itself is reacting to us." "That's unsettling," Elena muttered under her breath. The rift itself was a phenomenon unlike anything the crew had ever encountered. But if it was alive, if it was aware of them, that changed everything. Suddenly, the Erebus lurched violently. The force of the gravitational wave hit them like a hammer, shaking the entire ship and throwing Elena and her crew against their seats. "Brace for impact," Harper shouted as alarms blared throughout the ship. The ship was tossed like a toy in a storm, its engines struggling to maintain control as the gravitational forces threatened to tear them apart. Elena gripped the armrests of her chair, her knuckles white. This was no longer just about navigating the rift, it was a fight for survival. "We're stabilizing," Harper reported through gritted teeth, his fingers flying over the console. "But we've lost one of the aft stabilizers. We're going to be flying blind until we can repair it." "Do what you can," Elena ordered. "We can't stop now. We have to press forward." The ship limped onward, the corridor of the rift stretching out before them, its dark, twisting path a reminder of the vast, uncharted dangers that lay ahead. But Elena couldn't turn back now. The Etherians had revealed themselves, and their legacy was too dangerous to ignore. Whatever awaited them in the heart of the rift, they had to face it together. The Erebus limped deeper into the abyssal rift, its systems strained under the continuous bombardment of gravitational anomalies. The crew had no idea how much farther they had to go, but there was no turning back. The rift seemed to stretch on forever, its dark, swirling clouds and intermittent flashes of strange energy forming a tunnel that distorted everything, space, time, and perception. Elena Valen stood at the front of the command deck, her eyes fixed on the viewport. Her hands rested lightly on the console, her expression one of steely resolve. Every second felt like an eternity as they pushed forward, the ship shuddering violently with each wave of gravitational force that slammed into them. The once sleek Erebus now seemed more like a battered survivor, barely clinging to life as it fought its way through the shifting nightmare. "Captain, I've got something." Lyrasol's voice came through the comms, a tremor of both excitement and fear in her tone. "It's not just energy fluctuations. I'm reading what looks like structures, massive ones buried within the rift." "Structures?" Elena repeated, her heart skipping a beat. "Can you get a visual?" The scientist hesitated, her fingers flying across the controls. "It's hard to tell through the distortion, but I'm seeing massive crystalline spires. They're arranged in a pattern, some kind of grid. It's like a city, but ancient, really ancient." "Show me," Elena said. "Bring it up on the screen." The view on the screen flickered as Lyra patched into the ship's sensor array, bringing up a series of distorted images. The rift was still mostly a chaotic blur, but through the interference, something became visible, towering structures, their jagged, crystalline forms jutting out of the swirling darkness like broken teeth. They were enormous, far larger than anything humanity had ever encountered, and they seemed to stretch in every direction. Harper, who had been standing beside Elena, let out a low whistle. "That doesn't look like anything built by Etherians, or anyone else we know." Elena's mind raced. If these structures were real, then they could be the key to everything, the truth about the Etherians, about the legacy they had left behind, and why they had started watching humanity. But there was something else, something more unsettling about them. As she stared at the image, the spires seemed to pulse, glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light. It was as if they were alive. "Lyra, get us closer," Elena ordered. "We need to examine those structures in person." Harper's eyes narrowed. "Captain, we're barely holding it together as it is. One wrong move, and the ship might not survive." "I don't care," Elena said, her voice cold but determined. "We're going in. We'll make it work." The Erebus changed course, slowly edging closer to the strange structures that had appeared in the heart of the rift. As they drew near, the distortion around them grew stronger, pulling at the ship's hull like an invisible hand, twisting the fabric of reality. The crew was silent, each member gripped by the unknown dangers that lay ahead. There was a palpable tension in the air. the sense that they were about to breach a threshold that could change everything. "Shields are fluctuating," Harper said, his voice strained. "We can't get any closer without risking catastrophic damage." Elena looked at him, her eyes hard. "We don't have time for that. Lyra, can we pinpoint the origin of the energy readings? The source?" "Give me a second." "Yes, I've got it," Lyra replied. "There's a large, concentrated energy field at the center of the spires. It's a massive power source, but it's fluctuating in a way that doesn't make sense. It's like the energy is being redirected." Elena's heart pounded. "Redirected where?" "Unknown. But I can tell you one thing for sure, Captain," Lyra said, her voice now tinged with dread. "The energy signature doesn't match anything we've ever seen. It's not even Aetherian. It's older, much older." Before Elena could respond, the ship jolted violently again. The rift's gravitational waves had intensified, and the Erebus lurched forward, shuddering against the force of the pull. The hull creaked as the ship was dragged closer to the dark, twisting structures. The crew scrambled, trying to stabilize the ship as it was pulled inexorably toward the center of the rift. "We're too close," Harper shouted, his hands flying over the controls. "I can't hold us back much longer." The ship shook again, this time with such force that it knocked Elena to the ground. She scrambled to her feet, her heart racing. She knew they were moments away from either crashing into the heart of the rift or being destroyed by whatever lay within it. "Brace for impact," Elena barked, her voice loud enough to cut through the chaos. "We're going in." With a final violent shake, the Erebus was yanked forward, plunging into the heart of the abyssal rift. Time itself seemed to bend and fracture, and the ship was swallowed by the darkness, the glowing crystalline spires looming ominously in the distance. The crew braced for whatever came next, not knowing if they would survive the coming storm, or if they would uncover the true legacy of the Aetherians. The Erebus plunged deeper into the heart of the abyssal rift, its hull groaning under the immense pressure. Every inch of the ship shuddered, as if the very fabric of space and time were warping around them. Outside the viewport, the crystalline spires rose like jagged mountains in a dark sea. They seemed to pulse in rhythm with some unseen force, their alien energy vibrating in the very air. Inside the command deck, the crew fought to keep their composure, each member holding onto whatever they could as the ship's systems began to overload. The navigational console flickered, and the ship's lights dimmed, casting long shadows across the bridge. "Harper, what's our status?" Elena Valen demanded, her voice cutting through the noise. "Stabilizing, Captain, but barely." "The rift's gravitational pull is tearing us apart," Harper replied, his eyes glued to the screen in front of him. "The energy signatures from those spires are off the charts. It's like they're alive, and they're pulling us in. I can't fight it much longer." "Do what you can," Elena ordered, her jaw tight. "Lyra, any sign of what's generating this?" Dr. Lyra Sol was hunched over her console, her fingers moving rapidly over the keys. Her eyes were wide with shock. "Captain, I'm getting readings from inside the spires. There's someone, inside them. The energy signature is human, but there's more. The Aetherians are connected to it. It's like a fusion of their power with something older, something that predates them." "Older?" Elena asked, her voice steady despite the rising panic within her. "Older than the Aetherians. How is that even possible?" Lyra hesitated before replying, her voice thick with disbelief. "I don't know, but it's as if the Aetherians were trying to harness something even more ancient. Something that could shape reality itself." Suddenly, the ship lurched again, the force so violent that Elena was thrown against the console. Her head hit the hard surface, and for a moment, everything went black. When she came to, the room was spinning, the alarms blaring in the background. A cold sweat covered her face, but there was no time for weakness. "Captain, we're being pulled into the spires," Harper shouted. "We've lost control. We're going down." Elena's vision cleared, and she forced herself to stand, her pulse quickening. Outside, the spires loomed closer, each one twisting impossibly in the thick, distorted air. Their sharp, crystalline edges gleamed like jagged teeth, and at the center of the towering structures, something dark and foreboding glowed with an eerie, pulsating light. "Get us out of here," Alina ordered, but she knew it was too late. The ship was caught in an invisible current, a tidal pull stronger than any force they had ever faced. The Erebus had crossed the threshold into the heart of the rift, and there was no escape. The ship groaned as it was dragged closer to the center of the structures. Then, without warning, a flash of blinding light erupted from within the spires, and the crew was momentarily blinded. Alina raised her hand instinctively, shielding her eyes, but it was no use. The light pierced through her, through every corner of the ship, until it seemed to consume the very soul of the Erebus. The ship lurched again, this time violently enough to knock out every system in the vessel. The power grid shut down, and the emergency lights flickered on. Panic spread through the crew, but Alina fought to keep them calm. "Status report," she demanded, her voice carrying authority despite the chaos. Harper's voice crackled through the comms, weak and strained. We've lost power. Everything's down. I can't even see the spires anymore. It's like the rift just swallowed us whole." Lyra's voice was trembling. "I don't understand. We're surrounded by darkness. But the energy readings, there's something here. It's like the entire rift has become an extension of the power from those spires. It's like we've entered a living being." Alina's pulse quickened. This wasn't just about surviving the rift anymore. They had entered something far more dangerous, something alive. It was as though they had crossed into the very heart of the Etherean mystery, a place where time and space no longer obeyed any natural laws. Whatever awaited them in the heart of the rift was far more than they could have ever anticipated. And in the distance, as their ship floated helplessly in the void, a voice echoed through the ship, a voice not from any of the crew, but from the heart of the rift itself. "You should never have come." The voice was deep, ancient, and filled with a power that shook the very core of Alina's being. She stumbled back, her mind racing. Who, or what, was speaking? Then, a presence flooded the bridge, cold and overwhelming. Alina's heart pounded in her chest as she realized whatever had spoken, whatever lived within the rift, was aware of them, and it was no friend. "Captain," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible, "I think we've just awoken something." Alina's breath caught in her throat as the room filled with a deafening silence. Whatever they had unleashed, it was no longer just a threat from the past. It was a force that could reshape the future of humanity itself, and they were standing at the center of it. The bridge of the Erebus fell into an eerie, suffocating silence. The voice, deep and resonating, seemed to reverberate through the very walls of the ship. The crew stood frozen, every one of them gripped by an overwhelming sense of dread. Alina Valen's pulse hammered in her ears as the cold, ancient presence of whatever lurked in the heart of the rift seemed to press in on them, filling every inch of the ship. "You should never have come." The voice echoed again, this time accompanied by a low, rumbling sound that seemed to come from the depths of the rift itself. It was as if the very fabric of space was being torn apart by the sheer force of its presence. The walls of the Erebus shuddered, and the lights flickered wildly. In the distance, through the distorted viewport, the crystalline spires pulsed in time with the voice, each one glowing with a deep, malevolent energy. Who are you?" Alina managed to choke out, her voice barely above a whisper. The question felt small, insignificant against the vastness of the presence that surrounded them. There was no immediate answer. Instead, a ripple of energy swept through the ship, a shockwave that rattled the crew to their bones. Every instrument on the ship flickered and died. The comms went silent, the navigation systems went dark. The Erebus drifted helplessly in the void, its fate uncertain. Lyrasol clutched the edge of the console, her eyes wide with terror. "This isn't just the rift," she said, her voice trembling. "It's alive. It's been waiting for us." Elena's breath caught in her throat as she realized the truth. The rift wasn't just a region of distorted space. It was a sentient entity, or perhaps a gateway to something older, something far more powerful than anything humanity had ever encountered. And somehow, they had awoken it. The voice returned, more forceful this time, shaking the foundations of the ship. "You have trespassed upon sacred ground. Your kind was never meant to awaken us." The words hung in the air like an ominous omen. The crew exchanged frightened glances, unsure of what to do. The power of the entity was overwhelming, and it was clear that they were at its mercy. "We didn't mean to," Elena began, but her words faltered. "How do you apologize to something this old, this powerful?" she wondered. "How do you reason with it?" Before she could speak further, the entity's voice answered her as if it had read her thoughts. "You are insignificant, yet you have awakened something far older than you can comprehend. You have broken the balance." The energy from the spires grew more intense, swirling around the ship like a vortex. The crew braced themselves as the Erebus began to shake once again. It was no longer just the gravitational pull of the rift. It was as if the rift itself was manipulating the ship, bending it to its will. "You will be judged," the voice boomed, "and the consequences of your intrusion will be dire." The crew was silent, the weight of the entity's words sinking in. They were no longer just explorers, they were intruders, and whatever this ancient being was, it was about to decide their fate. Elena's mind raced. "This can't be the end. We can't let it end like this." "Listen to me," Elena said, her voice filled with defiance, cutting through the heavy atmosphere. "We didn't come here to harm you. We came to learn, to understand. Please, tell us what we've awakened, and we will leave. We will never return." For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, the voice spoke again, this time softer, almost curious. "You seek knowledge? You think you can comprehend what you've disturbed." The Etherians were merely children in the face of what lies ahead. "What you have uncovered is the beginning of an awakening that will reshape all of existence." Elena's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" The voice responded with a strange, hollow echo. "You are not the first to awaken us. The Etherians sought to control us, but they failed. Now, it is your turn to decide. Will you walk away, or will you join the forces that will shape the new dawn?" The words hung in the air like a weighty choice, and Elena felt a chill creep down her spine. The rift was not just a threat, it was an opportunity, an invitation to something far greater, something humanity could either embrace or be destroyed by. The choice is yours, human. Will you accept the consequences of your awakening? Elena stood, her mind racing. She realized then that their mission was never just about survival. It was about something far bigger, something that would shape the future of the galaxy. And with that realization came the understanding that the Erebus and its crew had been part of a larger story, one that spanned centuries and would continue long after their lives were over. They had come seeking knowledge. They had come seeking answers, but now they were facing a question that would define the fate of humanity. Would they accept the invitation, or would they walk away? The choice, for better or worse, was theirs to make.